Well, yeah. All right. We'll do our best while they're working on the PowerPoint. Hello, everybody, again. Okay, we're going to go without, as I mentioned, power corrupts, PowerPoint corrupts absolutely. So that's where we're at. Okay, so this is going to be the non-PowerPoint version of this presentation for the very first time. So we're in new territory. Well, that's back. Okay. So I want to ask first, before we get, so we're basically going to cover four things today, four topics. Writing and pitching op-eds, writing letters to the editor, writing press releases, and then we're going to do some overall writing tips. And then, at the end, I was going to give you a link to the PowerPoint, but we'll have to find some other way to get that link to you because that's got all the entire slide deck, so you'll be able to go back to that once you have that link. And I wanted to start by asking why you care about these products, letters, op-eds, press releases. Like, why do they matter in your work? I guess it's a question why you're here. What difference do you think they make? It's Kathleen says it's your voice. It's like, and like what do you hope to share? Yeah, it's changing attitudes. And,
educating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rallying the troops.
Yeah, right. The other folks, not even just the general public, but like your own folks.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, those are great. I mean, it's sort of like you don't want the news media controlling the message. You're trying to get equal time for your side of this debate, or even have a debate, because a lot of times it's not getting debate. You want to attach a face to policies. You want to show how these policies are impacting people in your group. You want to bring attention to your state or local group, track members, donations, and so forth. It also, doing any of these can open up media opportunities. Reporters, when we're looking for sources, often we're looking for people who've published before, written something. If you're out there, we'll find you. And then like the last thing that Elena, you said, is to empower the silent majority. And that's like the folks out there who are nervous about coming out. They're like impacted by these policies. They're in the shadows. You're being out there in public empowers other folks. And it also, there's a group of folks out there who haven't even thought about this topic. And you're helping shape their initial thoughts about, you're getting to them first before the mainstream media does. So those are some things that you might think about as you're thinking about the importance of this. So we're going to talk about op-eds, and normally if you think about op-eds, a lot of times people think op-eds are written by experts, and that is true, researchers, lawyers, et cetera, et cetera. You all are experts on this topic because of your life experience with these registries and the related laws. So you're absolutely qualified to write an op-ed. So I was going to talk about how to write them, be a little more challenging, talk about the structure of an op-ed without the PowerPoint, but I'll give you sort of there's sort of like 7 parts to an op-ed. It sounds like a lot, but the thing is, like, if you can think about the op-ed this way, you can tackle each part of it in turn, or you don't have to tackle them in order, but you can think about them in that way. By the time you're done, by the time you do the 7, you've got a finished piece. So there's the lead. By the lead, we mean just like the initial couple of sentences. So I'm just going to I'm not going to list them for you. They're not going to mean anything until I explain them. So the lead. that's maybe the most important piece. It's the hook. It's like the thing that keeps people reading. It's like that's what you know, besides the headline, maybe the most important part of the piece. And there's a few things you can do here with the lead. You can do a news hook, something that's in the news. I had an example about Ketanji Brown Jackson, the Supreme Court nominee, of a news hook. But something similar, something that maybe a newspaper has covered, something that's happened in your jurisdiction. You can start with a personal story. It could be like, my son was assaulted last week because he's on the state sex offense registry. That's powerful. People absolutely, with that lead, they will keep reading. It's a tough one, right? Because there you go in public. It's stuff we talked about this morning. It's a tough thing to do, but it is a real hook. You can turn conventional wisdom on end. You can say, everybody loves these apps that list folks on the registry in your area. Guess what? If you like those apps, there are other apps out there that are going to list other kinds of information that invade your privacy. You should reconsider whether these are a good thing or not. So that's like turning conventional wisdom on end. You can use an anniversary. You can go back. You can say 11 years ago, the Supreme Court ruled that sex offense notification laws can be applied retroactively because they don't punish ex-offenders. We now know that's spectacularly wrong because of our experience. So that's the lead. Bunch of options there in the lead. So that's number one. Then the second piece is the statement of shared values. We talked a little bit about that this morning. That's a statement about a value that we share as Americans. Polling shows the value that everyone across political ideologies cares about is freedom. So that is a great way to lead, is with freedom. So in talking about registries, it can be something like, as Americans, we believe in freedom, including freedom for people who've completed a sentence for a past sexual offense. We want towns and cities where people are free from coercion, where they get a job, where they live, or who they associate with. Starting with freedom. America's a place where people should be free. People should be free to choose the neighborhoods they live in, the schools that best suit them, and their children or spouses. Residency banishment laws are contrary to our values as Americans. So that's the statement of shared values. Then next comes the statement of the problem. And this, as I was saying this morning, this points directly at who's the problem, who is preventing achievement or attainment of the shared vision. So that's in search of votes, politicians have preyed on people's fears to create public enemies lists to distract us from what they're not doing on sexual violence that actually would make a difference. So to distract us from how little money we're actually spending on sexual violence prevention. So then next is your main theme. This is where you start, actually. You don't start with the lead when you're writing. When you're sitting down to write, you start with your theme. That's what's my point. If you're explaining it to your mom, what are you trying to get across? If you very pithy little statement about, what you're trying to prove. So that can be punishment that doesn't consider how to reintegrate those who've offended hurts all of us. It can be sex offense registries threaten the lives of people who've completed a sentence. They also hide the real issues in preventing sex crimes against children. That's the core in these examples of the op-ed. All right. So then you've got so now we're on number. So we've done lead. We've done statement of shared values. We've done statement of the problem. We've done theme, and so now we're on evidence. So that's next, your evidence. Supporting evidence, justifying your theme. Usually in an op-ed is 500 to 1,200 words. So you're looking at 3 pieces of evidence is a good, there's this rule of threes in public discourse that really seems to work. So 3 is great. So what is supporting evidence? What are we looking at there? It can be statistics and studies. There's a ton of stuff available at on NARSL's webpage under the resources tab. Lots of links to resources there, to statistics and studies. You can use a personal anecdote. A personal anecdote is absolutely supporting evidence for what you're trying to show. It's perhaps the most powerful one. You can cite an authority. Your state's, often these sex offense management boards at the state level don't do great things, but sometimes they do have good statistics and studies, or they've said, this is like citing an authority who knows something about the topic. It's a little bit different than statistics because these guys know about sexual violence. So citing them can be worthwhile. It's sort of an argument from authority. They're the authorities, we're citing them. And then last, sort of the last type of evidence is an analogy. And that's like you take something, you take a concept that people know about or people are familiar with, and then you apply it to your issue. So one example might be, the one that people use a lot with this topic is well, there's DUI, and I was thinking the Scarlet Letter. Yeah, no, that's a good point. No, I hadn't thought of those. I was thinking about Nixon's, President Nixon's public enemies list, and you can say Nixon used public enemies list to target people. These lists are worse because they target hundreds or thousands of people. So that's analogy. You're drawing a parallel. And then, so we're down on number 6 now, if you're keeping track. We are at the inoculation paragraph, this thing called the inoculation paragraph. So what's inoculation? Actually, I'll just throw it there. What's inoculation? Yeah. It's a vaccination against disease. You're getting ahead of a disease. So it's, you are in the inoculation paragraph, you're saying, okay, what's the counter argument to what I'm saying? What are the opponents going to say? And often, one of the most common counter arguments you might hear is, well, it might be bad policy, but if it saves one child, it's worth it, right? You hear that all the time. So, take that on. Say, some people might argue that registry might be bad policy. If they save just one child, they're worth it. That's absolutely wrong. We shouldn't be basing policy on the rare, horrific crime committed by one person while ignoring the research on the low reoffense rates on those who are on the registry. Doing that, focusing on this one child, takes money away from prevention efforts that actually are demonstrated to reduce crimes against hundreds or thousands of kids. So put that in there. That neutralizes the opposition. Okay, so we're down now on number 7, which is the solution or the call to action. So this is your conclusion. This is where it comes together. What do you want your audience to do? Here, often you can circle back to the lead. I had that in one of my examples in the lead. I had, my son was assaulted last week because he's on the state sex offense registry. You could circle back at the end and say, the state sex offense registry is an assault on the freedom of people who've committed a sentence for a past crime. It's time to abolish it and reinvest the money in services. The research shows actually work to make everyone freer and safer. So that's the 7 pieces of the op-ed. I'm going to open up the questions in just a minute. I wanted to talk just briefly about how you pitch an op-ed. So you're sending it off by email to the editor, looking up who the editor is of the outlet you're pitching. And essentially in your pitch, you're just basically saying a few things. What's the idea? You're just very briefly what the idea is. You've got that already. You wrote the op-ed. That's your theme. That's the main point. Second is sort of why now? Why does it matter now? What's the news hook? That's going to matter to an editor. What's going on that this ties to? Third, sort of why should people care? Next is, and you're pretty well situated to answer why should people care. It could be, are your readership's son or daughter next, for example. Next is the fourth sort of element of the pitch is why you? Why are you the best one to write this piece? We've already talked about that. You're experts on this issue. And then finally, how do we reach you? Just include your contact information. So it's I'll have a sample. In the PowerPoint, I've got an example of a pitch. It's just basically 2 short paragraphs. It's not as important as the op-ed itself, obviously. That's what matters to um, to an editor, but it's nice to have a little synopsis of it in your pitch. All right, so you send it off, and the editor responds, hopefully. If they say no, no is maybe the beginning of yes. So, like, be nice. Say, thanks a lot for getting back to me. And that's always the thing. Like, be nice. Even if you're mad about what they're doing, you can say, hey, could we turn this into a letter? Would you run a letter to the editor if I condense this down? So that's one option. You can, if they say yes, obviously that's the best of all possible worlds, and thank you very much for showcasing this issue. It's not so much about you, the writer, about you, the person. It's thanks for bringing attention to this issue. Then the more common thing is going to be like they don't respond, right? So here, so like when you send it off, put a thing on your calendar that says follow up with editor, and like it's going to depend, when you follow up, it's going to depend on how evergreen the topic is. Like, you got an ordinance, a local ordinance coming up in the next several days. Like, you want that thing to run soon, so you're going to follow up the editor maybe the next day or 2 days out, and you're gonna be very polite and just say, hey, just checking back in, this follow-up email, just checking back in, haven't heard back, which is fine, but this topic is super time sensitive, so if I don't hear back from you by noon tomorrow, I'm going to just assume you can't use it. I'm going to pitch it, I'm going to send it elsewhere. Nothing wrong with that. So as far as where to pitch an op-ed, everybody wants to get into bigger papers, but like as we talked about this morning, it's like state and local papers matter more usually on this. So if it's a state issue, if it's a state regulation, it's the state, state legislature can read the state paper, like in New York, it's the Albany Times Union. And similarly in your own state. So if it's a local issue, a local ordinance, obviously your local paper, you're going to have much better luck with a local paper. They're always looking for local voices, so that's local paper is great. Okay, I'm just going to take any questions at this point about op-eds, and sorry again about, but actually that, I don't know, did that make sense? Go ahead, Gail. Yes.
I was worried I wasn't going to get any exercise. Hi, I'm Gail Collider, for those of you who don't know. Does it matter when you're sending something, is the title that you put in the subject line, do you just put in like, here's an op-ed, or
great.
like how to lose an American family,
Yeah, wow, I didn't include that, Gail, but that's like, yeah, I mean, it's like, it's op-ed submission, and then whatever title you came up with, and they're going to put their own title on it probably in the end. But like, if you can come up with something compelling, sensational, even of the most, it's op-ed submission, boom, whatever you'd love that title to be. They like suggestions, so, Kathleen.
I've tried to do this before, and unfortunately, it gets very expansive. So I'm asking about length of an op-ed.
Oh, yeah. Oh, op-eds. Yeah, 500 to 1,200 words. 1,200 is like really out there. Nobody, it's like most of the time they want it, yeah. And, check the paper. I didn't say that, but like, check their, like, usually they've got guidelines on their site. You can look it up. You can just Google, op-ed guidelines publication. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Can I follow up on that?
Yes.
She asked my question. And I'll sit down with the template like we've just been through and try to cover the second 7 points. And what I've written turns out to be double the number of words that is allowed. So any comments, guidelines, suggestions for how you shrink the 2,500 words that you just wrote down to 1,200 and don't lose the 7 points that we just talked about?
I mean, it's a lot easier to cut than to add. I would start with that. If and this is a tough thing. I mean, because I get into this, like, it is so hard to cut your own writing because you just like, what is that thing? It's going to kill the golden goose. Like, it's killing your children is the thing that writers say. Killing your children. It's like, because you wrote that thing, you put time into it. But like, I mean, I don't know. If you have trouble doing that, and I do, you can get somebody else to read it and just, see what they might suggest. Because like often this thing that we think is like, this little detail we think is really super important. It's like, I'm trying to think if there, you know what? Does anybody use ChatGPT 3? Okay, yeah. So like, plug that thing into ChatGPT 3 and say, cut this to 800 words. See what it comes up with. I mean, it's editing stuff. The AI is doing a pretty good job of copy editing. And I mean, you might try it like you might try it once and it'll come up with something you don't love and say, do this again, but don't cut the paragraph about X. I mean, you can like refine your terms. Anyway, that's another way. So this is artificial intelligence. This is it's a tool called Chat GPT-3. I'm using it to write headlines. So like, it'll do a lot of stuff. Yeah, it's really pretty good. And you have to, like, if you're gonna use it, you gotta sign up, but it's fine. They don't send you ads or anything. Just like sign up. It's free. Got a free version. So that's what. And Araceli, I think.
Yes. So is it going to work out to be about 7 paragraphs? Would that be about 1,200 words, or do you combine paragraphs? How do you do that?
Depends how long your paragraph. I would keep those paragraphs I think mostly separate.
So 7 paragraphs is about what it should look like? Okay.
I mean, it depends how long your paragraphs are. 7 paragraphs usually is going to work out to about a page and a quarter to a page and a half, and that's going to run 600 to 700 words.
Okay.
So that's about right. I mean, I think you can. Now, of course, like with your evidence section, you're doing 3 pieces of evidence. You're not going to be able to put all those into one paragraph, probably. So you're probably getting a little longer than that in the end. But all right. Anything else? So great. All right. This is going better than I thought. I thought this would be a disaster without the PowerPoint, but I think it's going all right. I don't know. You guys look like you're not completely bored yet or losing the thread, so I'll keep going. So, yes, Elena. Oh, Elena, I think you're supposed to go to the mic. Yes.
Sorry. Okay. If you're writing an op-ed and you're naming a source when you're doing your proof source, is it okay to include a link or not?
Yeah, you can.
Like if I want to say Narsal states blah, 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 and then do a link to the article, that's okay?
I wouldn't, put it this way. You can include a link, and so in the online version of your op-ed that the paper runs, they probably will include that live link. Obviously, it runs in print. They can't do that. So, like, I wouldn't rely on that link to tell people where to find whatever it is you're linking to. So, like, it's got to say, as Narsal, you got to explain what Narsal is, a little bit about how to, anyway, yeah, you're just think of it as a print piece. So when you're writing, when you're finishing, you're reading it, final, just think of it as a print piece, because that link is not going to show up in print. So, but you can include it. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I was just wondering, because people can still read it, and like you're reading a paper, if you're really inclined, you could write the link down. And I always name, when I do anything like that, I name the organization, like if it's the U.S. Sentencing
Yes.
Commission, I'll
Yes.
refer to
Yes.
it that way. So-
Yeah, the thing not to do is to say, as many studies have shown, link, 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 link.
Yeah,
Because that's not going to help you in the print. You know what I mean? So, like, yeah.
Thank
have to
you.
say, yeah, sure. Okay. So, we're going to keep going here. Letters to the editor. You know, if you've done an op-ed, this is going to be much briefer because letters are 200 to 300 words, like half the length of, half the length of an op-ed. So, structure of a letter is actually identical to the op-ed, just shorter. So, like, basically, you got the lead, and it doesn't matter, like, people say, do I say dear editor, do I say to the, whatever, it doesn't matter. They don't print that. That's, don't worry about that. So remember we said we had all these options for lead in the op-ed, but you really only have one in your letter to the editor, and that's a news hook. You got a hook to something. That's the reason that paper's going to run it, is because it's something current that the reader's going to link to something. Think about in relation to something that matters, either like an article the paper has run, or something that's happened in the community, or an ordinance coming up. Something. It's got to have a news hook. So, like, you just start out, thank you for Henry Heck's August 9th story about the 2,000-foot residence restriction being proposed by Magistrate Mussolini, whatever. That's just like one sentence, the news hook. Then I talked about shared value, so that's next. America's a place where people should be free, including those who've completed a sentence for a past criminal offense. All of us should have the freedom to choose the neighborhoods and schools that best suit us, etc. Our children and spouses. So that's a shared value. Again, just like one sentence. That's two sentences. Real brief. Then comes the problem. The problem is, again, pointing fingers. It's unfortunate that grandstanding politicians passed a law forbidding citizens who've completed a sentence for sexual offense from living in nearly all of our homes and apartments. That is splitting up families and forcing people into homelessness. That's the problem. Then comes your main theme. That's the one or two sentences. Again, that's like the core of your point, your main point, the place you start. So, like, residency bans betray American values. It's a theme. It's like, boom. Very short. In terms of evidence, you've got space for one. You don't have space for three. So it's like, just choose your best one. Multiple. It can be general. It can be multiple research studies have shown the bans on where those on Colorado's sex offense registry can live cause more problems than they solve and do nothing to protect kids. And then finally comes the solution, or the call to action. Here's what you want people to do. I respect the magistrate's desire to protect our children, but urge him to withdraw this dangerous proposal, which will do nothing of the sort. I also appeal to residents of Englewood to contact your council members to ask them to oppose it. Name and address, and you're done. 200 to 300 words. Okay, any questions, thoughts about letters? If not, we'll move on to press releases. Okay. All right, press releases. Now, so like these first two products, op-eds, letters to the editor, your audience was the general public. Press releases, the audience is reporters. It's the media itself. So the structure is different. So essentially what you're trying to do here, you may have seen this, is the thing we get frustrated with. Police departments, sheriff's departments put out a press release, reporters pull from that thing, and they just like pull directly into their article, right? They just cut and paste. Well, you want them to do that with your press release. You want to make it easy for them, as easy as possible for them to do that, which means you're mirroring the structure of an article that that reporters write. And so essentially, you're not starting now. You know, I said before, with letters and op-eds, you started with a lead. Here you're starting with the who, what. Well, I should say, obviously, I missed something. You've got to start with a headline. You give that thing a headline. That's the first thing. So you're telling, and you're trying to be provocative with your title. I was looking at Women Against Registries press release about their Supreme Court protest earlier this year. Groups condemn the worst Supreme Court decision, the worst Supreme Court decision in history. Now, not likely a reporter's going to run that. Well, they could. They could actually use that because the worst Supreme Court decision in history is in quotes. They might. Then you put a little date line. You'll see this in the PowerPoint. It doesn't matter that much. It's just like you may see this city and date. It's just a formatting issue. And then you've got a lead paragraph. And so here's where your structure matches the structure of an article a reporter writes. This is just who, what, when, where. Just the facts. So it's like, on Friday, groups supporting those on sex offense registries held a vigil in the steps of the U.S. Supreme Court to demand action on overturning an egregious Supreme Court decision. That case, decided in 2003, contained flagrantly inaccurate assertions about the chances someone convicted of a sexual offense will go on to commit another sexual offense. Now you'll notice, in theory, a reporter could pull that and just right into their story. They're gonna, if they do, they're gonna omit some of the adjectives. They're gonna omit egregious, or they'll put that egregious in quotes. They'll omit flagrantly inaccurate because they're supposed to be neutral. But essentially, they've got what they need there to run a lead, to run the first paragraph of their own story. So then you've got your who, what, when, where. That's your start. Then you've got your main theme again. This is the main point you're trying to make. This is the first thing you should write. Again, the first thing you sit down to write. What are you trying to get across? What's this about? What are you trying to prove? So the Smith v. Doe decision was based, this is the Women Against Registry press release. The Smith v. Doe decision was based on a single inaccurate news article. It should be overturned. And you can put this in a quote. The Smith v. Doe decision was based on a single inaccurate news article, should be overturned, said Eric Equity, head of whatever. And what that does, why the reason you're putting that in quotes is because then the lazy reporter or the very stressed reporter and on deadline reporter doesn't have to call you up and say, hey, can I talk to so-and-so? They might just pull that thing and run it. That's why you put it in quotes. That's why you're including quotes. Oh, you're putting this is your main theme. So this is a 1 or 2 sentence statement of your key point. I'm saying, you can put, it works very well to put that in a quote. Make that a quote from you, Gail, for example. So next come more quotes from spokespeople of other organizations, whoever's signing on to your press release. More quotes. And the thing is now, what we don't have in this press release now is that statement of shared values and statement of the problem, you notice, because we've been trying to match what reporters do. So you can put those things, the statement of shared values and the statement of the problem, you can embed those in quotes instead. So you can say, as Americans, in quote, this is a quote, as Americans, we all believe in freedom. We want towns and cities where people are free from coercion, where they get a job, where they live, or who they associate with, said Julie Justice, Executive Director. Supreme Court made a horrible mistake. New cases are coming through the court. It's time for the Supreme Court to overturn it. So that's a quote. You don't have to be too rigid with where the quotes go, but they can really appear anywhere. But the idea, again, do quotes so that the media can, reporters can just pull that right in their story. And then finally, any supporting evidence. Attach any supporting evidence, links to studies, names of experts, support your position, all that sort of stuff. And essentially you're looking at, with a press release, 2 pages max. That's sort of a good guideline. I definitely wouldn't go much beyond that. And reporters, I get a ton of these press releases, and I'm sort of reading the first 2 paragraphs. So that's the most important piece of the press release. All right, I'm going to stop and ask if there are questions before we go on to the last part of this. All right. So, tips on the writing process. Oh, yes. Oh, we got two people. Sorry. I'm glad you went to the microphone. I thought maybe you were leaving.
And all the other ones you gave us 100 number of words, and now you're giving us number of pages. Can we make it apples to
Oh,
apples?
yeah. 2 pages is 1,000 words.
1,000.
Essentially, though, it's like, press release, roughly 800 to 1,000. Yeah.
I'm struggling with the local choice because that's where it was such a sensational, reactive situation, even though it's been 5 years. And nobody really reads those very much anymore, and I kind of want to go for the New York Times, I want this to really get out there. So is that crazy or
No,
too
try
lofty?
it first. Try the Times first.
I mean,
And if it doesn't get accepted there, go down to the state, and if it doesn't get rejected there, go down to the local. I mean, there's no reason you can't. Now, I don't know if I said it. Did I say it? Like, you shouldn't pitch them all at the same time. You got to do it one at a time because, God forbid, more than one accepts it. Then you got to say no to somebody. Then you sort of, your relationship with them gets a little squashed.
I would just be afraid that it would bring up a lot of knee-jerk reaction from the original huge damning article that was written initially, that if they heard from me again, they would be, ready to pounce. So North Carolina, one of the worst ones.
Yeah. So you're afraid that there was an original horrible story,
Horrible.
and now you're bringing attention back to it. So this is where, like, to me, it all depends on your personal comfort with being in public on this issue. I guess that's what it comes down to. And, if you're in a situation where you can't do that, and you don't want attention drawn to your family or whatever, or yourselves, then you're right. You wouldn't do another
you asked
follow-up.
at the beginning, why do this?
Yeah.
Because I really feel that none of us in this room knew what it was like we do now. I didn't know.
No.
I
Yeah.
had no idea.
Right.
And I want everyone to know what we're going through,
Right.
how wrong it is.
Yep.
And so that's the reason to do it.
Yep.
And the New York Times would reach more people. So.
Absolutely. No question. I mean, I don't know if you know David Feiga. He did his movie Untouchable. He did an op-ed video. It was a really interesting product he did in the Times on this thing. It was really that got a ton of exposure. If you can get in the Times, great. But again, like, the only thing about the Times is it's got to be something. You got to hook to something that was in the Times. It's got to be something they ran that you're responding to. Yeah. So that's the only thing.
I was just wondering if it makes sense for an individual to make a press release, or is that more organized
It's
towards
an organization. It's an organization. That's
Just
right.
wanted to double
Yes.
check on it.
Yes. That's correct. Thank you. That's an actually good distinction. Gail again.
Okay. We have submitted a number of op-eds over the years, and they go nowhere. We now subscribe to a service that does this distribution for us, basically, and it got picked up. And so we've been successful with that. Do you have any experience with that, and why you would see what, do you think it's a good idea or not a good idea?
That's interesting. What's the service?
Oh, God, I need to know.
I mean, not the specific service, but what do? They distribute to a number of papers, Gail?
I don't know how they put it
How they do
out,
it,
but
but
all
they
of a
put it out.
sudden, we were getting picked up here and there, and it made all the difference.
Wow.
Because it got picked up, then we got calls from, like, a TV station for us to do an interview.
Wow.
And then it got picked up again, and even some legislators knew about it, and when we started calling to fight the bill, I mean, we used, like, Florida, I think one of the titles was something like Florida's Contrary to Families or something
Right.
like that, and we attacked the legislature. We were really bold, and I'm having one of my brain issues here. It's like, I'm having a recall problem. But it did make a difference when we used this service, so we've now just subscribed to it, and we I think prepaid for it, and we can send out so many between now and the end of the year, and it's, I think, at least one a month or something.
Wow, that's really great. This is why, like, these are conversations, because I always learn something in these sessions. That's just great. So ask Gail, what did they do? Ask Anita. Okay, yeah. That's great. and I want to find out myself.
Well, a follow-up to hers,
Yeah.
it's a distribution service. I worked in radio, and we would get show prep from
Yeah.
services like that.
Yeah.
So those papers and stuff sign up for those.
Yeah.
And they just take, like, when people submit stuff, and it just gets sent out to everybody. And it's up to them whether they pick it up or not. It's just, it's just a distribution service.
Yeah.
So you guys are on the creating content end, and the newspapers are on the taking that content and printing it in. So you're basically creating content so they don't have to. But it's a service that they, like the papers or whoever subscribe to, and then they just go through that and cherry pick what they want to print. But we were more likely to pull stuff when we worked at radio from the those services because we had subscribed to them. So
Yeah.
it was like, we're going to use this
Yeah.
resource. So,
Yeah.
but a follow-up for writing these, can you write under a pseudonym or like a ghostwriter name? Just to follow up on her comment about if it's something that's local where you're really involved in it, is that an acceptable thing to be able to do?
Probably not, they're usually not going to run that.
Okay.
Not usually, unless it's something really, I mean, what was the thing? The Trump administration's mole, wrote an op-ed in the Times and they ran it. That is so unusual. That's really hardly ever happens. It was only because of the sort of the anyway.
My local paper has a specific policy against it.
Yeah, that's right.
Your name and the city
Yeah.
that you're from.
Yeah, that's right. And so wait, I just want to, so it's, if people are looking this up, it's like distribution service. Is that right?
That's not the name of it.
Oh.
Like, we had trade magazines that would have advertisements
Yeah.
for it. So it was specifically something that was an industry-based thing.
Right, okay.
And I don't know, in the world of the internet, you can probably just search like distribution service.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Or content distribution.
Okay,
And it'll pop up.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, PR Newswire does that. That's right.
That's it.
Yeah, that's right. They do that. Sure, that's right.
I just,
So I'm sorry, just to make it, so you can Google distribution service, Google PR Newswire, that's great.
Yeah, Associated Press, they
Has their own,
service like that.
okay, great. So he just said Associated Press has their own distribution service. You can Google that as well. Okay,
I just wanted to add to what Gail said. It was PR Newswire that we used, and
Yeah.
they sent it out to 1,000+
Yep.
distribution points. It's also very effective as an evidence source, because if one periodical if one source picks it up, you can quote another news source as evidence, so that it gives people thinking that it's really out there already.
I see. Right.
So
it's run-
they used it very effectively, and it really got to the legislatures. And it was also put into, we also used, when it would get to the first source, we would use that in the calls to action to go to the politicians as well.
So you had multiple uses for
Yeah,
that.
so we
for that
leveraged it. It
single-
really was
Yeah.
great. It
Yeah.
really was a differentiator this year in the legislative
Wow.
session.
Yeah, that's great.
Gotta say that.
I guess that's another reason to write this stuff, is it gets used in multiple ways. You guys are reusing that thing that got printed. I mean, when stuff gets printed, you're right, gets
And
taken seriously.
It was Gail was one of the you were alluding
Yeah.
to the quotes about using,
Yeah.
Gail was Gail Coletta says, da-da-da.
Yeah.
And I think we did one with one of the representatives quote, which was just an absurd quote, and wrote to that. So it
Nice.
can really be used effectively.
Nice. That's great. That's great. Okay.
One more
yes,
question.
One more, yeah.
Earlier, you said something about, send it to them one at a time in order because you don't want to send it two places
Yeah.
at the same time, but that only refers to the op-eds. Why is it important that an op-ed goes to just a specific paper?
Right.
And the press releases you could send to the whole place?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. Thank you very
Can you
much.
clarify that distinction?
Absolutely. No, press releases can go all over creation. Yeah, no doubt. Op-eds do not. That's correct. Yeah, thank you. That's great. All right. So I'm just going to very briefly do some tips on writing. So tips on the writing process. So this applies to all three products. The first is use action verbs. So basically it's sort of like X causes Y. That's sort of so it's here's an example, like registries hide the real issues in preventing sex crimes against children. So like, banishment laws drive people into homelessness. That's instead of, like, the opposite of that is passive voice, like passive constructions, which is like the there are, there is, or like X is caused by Y. I mean, most people don't write that way, but like choose like powerful verbs that like convey emotion, sort of. So registries endanger families, for example. That's like the first. Got maybe 5 tips here. That's number 1. Second is a little related. Keep it simple. Use plain language. If you got a choice, this gets to Gail was talking about run. Do you write how you speak? And like I'm this way too. Like run-on sentences and this and that. Like put a period. Like just like chop that sentence into 2. Short sentences versus long. Short words versus long. Because like it's funny. The average person likes to read at a 6th or 7th grade level. Believe it or not. So like actually one thing you can do in Microsoft Word is to run the it's a reading level check. I'm trying to remember what the command is, but like you should come in at 7th, 8th grade when you run that check. That'll help you simplify your word choice and your, because it's measuring your sentence length and your word choices. So, what's KISS? Stupid. Thank you. That's great. All right. So like, and avoid jargon, like, not recidivism rates. Instead use like likelihood of committing another offense. Not residency restrictions, say bans on where people can live. Residency bans, like gets across the idea better. So try to avoid jargon. Beat writer's block. So how do you beat writer's block? So like as I mentioned earlier, like write your theme first, your main idea. Write that down first. Just get that down. And then like if you see my first drafts, they're a complete mess. Like they're called a rough draft for a reason. You're like it's like the reason people get hung up, and the reason well, not as much anymore. Used to get hung up. Is like I'm trying to write the perfect intro, and you're not going to be able to. The intro often comes last. So just like write whatever comes easiest. Like write down that theme. It's like, there's this study I want to mention. Put that in. You don't have this, leave holes to put your stats in. And they're like, I should include this anecdote about somebody I know. And then, just throw it all into your first draft. It's a rough draft for a reason. Just get it down. And then you can fill in later your second draft. So that, to me, is the way to read, to beat writer's block. Move fast. So we've talked about active, passive voice, talked about beating writer's block. We're now on move fast, and that's just like, you got a few days sometimes to get these things out. So like, if you can, get right on it, get these out. They're sort of the sooner the better, the more timely the better. So, so that's 4th. Edit your work is 5th. This is a tough one. Like, if you've got a friend who is good with words, have them read it. Nobody likes to get feedback, but it really does help. I have my wife read stuff. She marks it all up. It's like, oh my God, really? Like, but she's usually got something in there that I've screwed up or is really obtuse, and I think it's clear and it's not. So like, or if you don't have that, set it aside for an hour or even a day. You're working against the clock, so you can't let it sit too long. But it helps if you don't have somebody else to read it. If you put it down and come back to it, that helps for you to read it clean and cold. Stick to length requirements. We talked about that. 5 to 1,200 words for op-eds, 2 to 300 for letters, 2 pages, 7 to 900 for press releases. And then finally, reject the government's language. Child safety zones do no such thing. They do not protect children, and you shouldn't use that language or buying into the government's idea when you use that language. So they are, they're government-imposed ban zones. They are Soviet-style no-go zones. Whatever. Don't use their language. Not civil commitment. I don't know if anybody listened to that debate between Emily Horowitz and whoever the debate partner was. He was talking about civil commitment as this nice concept. That is an alternative. It is like this great thing. Sounds great, doesn't it? Civil commitment. It's not. It is indefinite detention after a sentence. Call it that. Like, don't use it, or at least at first. I mean, you could say indefinite detention, also known as civil commitment, and then you could use it after that. But make sure people know what that actually means. Never sex offender. Person on the registry, person forced to register, registered citizen. Like, I was listening to this therapist recently on, I forget where I was listening, what this was on, but she said, people are giving second chances to everybody except sex offenders. I was like, no wonder. I mean, like, you're using the language, language that matters a heck of a lot. Like, that conveys an idea, and like, just never use it. And I go to all sorts of lengths. My editors sometimes put it down. I'm like, no, I'm not using it. So like, I do all sorts of backflips, and it gets longer that way. All of these things, construction goes a little bit against what I just said. The construction is longer, but it matters not to use that term. Okay, in the PowerPoint, I'm going to actually read the link so that I'm going to read this like 5 times. Okay, here it is. It is https:// two backslashes, and then, sorry, thank you, and then bit.ly, so that it's B as in boy, IT dot LY / bear with me, okay, writing op-eds, all one word, writing WRITING OPEDS. And I'm going to reread that. Just like the previous link. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it's https:// bit.ly WRITINGOPEDS. So anybody didn't get it? Should I do it again? No backslash. / is done, pointed out. Nothing's capitalized. All lowercase. That's all lowercase. Sorry, yeah. That's this whole thing, the entire slide deck is there. And, in there, I've got a list of resources that I think will be there's, I mentioned this messaging guru, Natchenko Osorio, this morning. She's got a whole messaging guide on how to write about criminal justice that I think is really super. And then the Opportunity Agenda is another group. It's funny, they do, what's great is that their advice is very similar. But they've also got a communications toolkit, and they've got some examples of op-eds in there. I think really, if you want to see the entire product together, it's helpful. It's called the Opportunity Agenda, and it's their communications toolkit is what it's called. But all that's in the slide deck if you're able to pull that up. Yes, Andy.
I have 4 questions from the live stream.
Great.
The first one is it advisable to publish an op-ed or a letter on a blog or website before the media outlet accepts the submission?
They won't run it if it's published elsewhere and they find out about it. They are going to be angry. So
Okay.
don't.
So don't do that. All right.
Yep.
Next, I have seen articles that list too many people as sources and it's confusing. Is this an issue of writing style or are there rules of thumb?
Too many sources. I don't think there's a rule of thumb. I mean, I guess theoretically there could be too many quotes in a story. I mean, often that's it, but no, I don't think that's. I wouldn't worry too much about that. And like you're writing an op-ed or a letter, you're not quoting anybody there. In a press release, you're quoting folks. I suppose there could be too many quotes, but that's better than not enough quotes. I don't know.
I might be able to clarify that just from my own reading of these things. When you get a bunch of quotes, and particularly multiple people who have been quoted, they'll use pronouns to reference somebody said before,
right.
or just a name, and I find myself scrolling back through the article trying to figure out who in the world that is they're talking about.
No, that's a good point.
All right, so the third one then is papers are not read as often today. Are there any special considerations to submitting to digital media organizations?
I'm trying to think of an example of digital media that run letters. Well, they do absolutely run op-eds. Yeah, no question. I mean, so like the Appeal, the outlet I write regularly for, will run more of an opinion piece. If they Google the Appeal criminal justice, they'll find it. They could try submitting an op-ed there. The Marshall Project does too, occasionally. There's a little higher bar. I'm trying to think of the name of the group. It's not the Prison Policy Network, I believe. 5 minutes? Oh, sorry. Okay.
Are we over?
No, we got.
Okay, well then one final one, if I may.
Yep.
As a registrant, how do I balance addressing registry concerns in the public forum with keeping me and my family safe?
The only way to do that is to use a partial, like not your full name, run your first name and then whoever asked that, and not run your full name. I mean, if you're worried about your family, I totally get that. And, there's nothing that ensures complete safety. So. All right. Thanks very much, folks. Been a great audience. Appreciate it. Thank you.